New York City is a hot spot, especially now that Broadway is open. If you're taking in a show this season, bear in mind that the costume industry took a massive hit during the shutdown and is still working to recover. WPBS had the pleasure of producing a series of educational segments in New York on the science behind costume design and brings you this story on the Costume Coalition and the effort it's making to regain its financial footing.
And have over 18,000 studs hand placed on these costumes. We never got to a point of despair, per se, but certainly it hasn't been fun. I mean, it hasn't been an enjoyable 18 months. The Costume Industry Coalition is a group of small businesses in and around New York City that create, supply, and care for the costumes for stage and screen. We were created out of the pandemic. The Costume Industry Coalition certainly has raised an awareness about what it takes to bring a costume to stage. For example, Moulin Rouge won the Tony for Best Costumes. Catherine Zuber designed those costumes. But to get her designs from over here on a piece of paper to over here on stage, it actually took 180 costume experts and specialists to create 793 costume looks, and it took over 36,000 labor hours. We have over 130 costumes on display, all of them borrowed from our clients. So we put together an exhibition in 3.5 months, which typically would take about 2 years. And it is now benefiting the public because they can actually walk in, not only see the product on display, but we have craftsmen here working. So you'll see the people and the process behind them and learn a little bit about what it takes to get a costume on stage.
Can you describe a little bit of your expertise to me?
So I'm a costume designer, so I do design, I illustrate, and I use Photoshop, Illustrator, ZBrush to generate the work to support my design and to support other designers.
When we closed the books on 2020, the members of the Costume Industry Coalition collectively tabulated $26.6 million in lost gross revenue. The amount of work that we now are being asked to do to remount everything almost instantaneously is putting a huge strain on our industry. So that is sort of the next chapter of what we're trying to work through. The amount of overtime that we've had to pay, workers to work 50 and 60 hours to get the product through then impacts profit margins. Plus, we are all carrying the burden of the financial debt that we're collectively in, which is, I think the last time I tabulated, is about $3.5 million. So to get out of a pandemic, it was sort of like we were all on life support for so long in the ICU, and suddenly it was like, everyone's like, get up, you've got to go to work. And it's been really difficult to sort of get everyone back up and running. We had raised about $500,000 in recovery to then be granted through our fiscal sponsor, which is the Artisans Guild of America. And they have a grant program that we can now apply to. Because we sort of opened the door into what it takes to create art in America. And while we are a microcosm in and around New York City, this is happening across the country. There are arts institutions across the country that are suffering, and not just the people who are on the stage, but the people who are behind the scenes. And I think that ultimately what needs to happen in our country is there needs to be a greater understanding of the creative economy and the driver that creatives are. There's so many other arts institutions and arts-related businesses like ours that need help through this pandemic, and we know if we get the help, we actually will be part of the economic recovery of our country because of our contribution to the creative economy.